Comic book writers, please stop making the most uncomfortable relationships of all time. Hey, it's Chug. Comics have had some of the weirdest and most uncomfortable relationships in history. I mean, whoever thought that having Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, brother and sister, hook up while Wolverine watched, might need to get their head checked. But although comic readers have seen almost everything by this point, there's one relationship that's more uncomfortable and vile than all the rest. So let's talk about the time Gwen Stacy, aka Spider-Man's girlfriend, hooked up with Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. And by hooked up, I mean they had sex. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Wait, Joe, what are you saying? Green Goblin and Gwen Stacy had sex? What the hell are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about one of the most infamous Spider-Man retcons of all time. Sins Past. Now, many of you out there probably already know a little bit about Sins Past, but for those of you who might not, here's a quick recap. Sins Past was a Spider-Man storyline that released in the early 2000s. A brief synopsis of the story says that a long time after Gwen's death, her mysterious mistake comes back to haunt Spider-Man in a big way. This mysterious mistake actually leads to two assassins coming to hunt down Spider-Man. But when Spider-Man manages to pull off a mask of one of the assassins, he discovers that it looks just like Gwen. As Spider-Man investigates this further, he discovers that these assassins are actually Gwen's children, and she had an even bigger secret. Gwen had an affair with Norman Osborn that led to her getting pregnant, and she gave birth to two children who aged at an accelerated rate. Gwen ended up regretting this affair and gave birth secretly to the twins in Europe. But when she returned, Norman Osborn was pretty pissed off, so he set off to kill her on the bridge, which was a massive retcon to the actual death of Gwen Stacy. After Gwen was killed by the Green Goblin, Norman found the twins, raised them, and then poisoned their mind against Spider-Man, saying that Spider-Man was the one who killed their mother. Which Norman may or may not be right about. We actually discussed that topic in this video here. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, when this story released, Spider-Man fans loved it. Just kidding, it was universally hated. Even to this day, it's almost universally hated. I only say almost universally hated because while researching this video, I found a person on Reddit who posted about why they love Sins Past so much. But pretty much any Spider-Man fan you talk to will tell you that they hate Sins Past and they do their best to ignore it. And I would totally agree with that, especially since it has so many repercussions. People hate Sins Past so much, the list of complaints is like infinite. But many people complain that this story is knocking Gwen off this pedestal she's held on. She was a great girlfriend, and her death had such a profound impact on Peter Parker's life and on the Spider-Man franchise as a whole that she's been held on this godlike pedestal for decades. So for many people, knocking her off that pedestal was upsetting. However, I don't think that's the real issue. Nobody's perfect, and Gwen making mistakes would truly show her humanity, even if that mistake was cheating on Peter. I'm not sure if I totally agree with the cheating plot. I think there's like a million other ways a writer could have knocked Gwen off the pedestal or shown her humanity. But I mean, if they felt they really had to make her a cheater for the story, then I guess it's fine. However, I think it's totally out of character for Gwen to cheat on Peter with Norman. It would be much more reasonable for Gwen to cheat on Peter with somebody like Harry or Flash or, I mean, even like Johnny Storm or anyone in their friend group or anyone in the similar age group. But why would she ever cheat on Peter with a psycho twice her age who she's seen be a total asshole to his own son, and she's like on record hated? It makes absolutely no sense at all for Gwen to get with Norman. It's just fucking weird and disgusting. I get Spider-Man's always had this sort of soap opera melodrama to it, but that just doesn't fit. It just seems like someone who wanted to sleep with Gwen writing themselves into the story. If you wanted that Spider-Man teen drama back, just have her cheat with one of Spider-Man's friends. It doesn't have to be creepy to be interesting. However, even more importantly, this storyline ruins pretty much every other storyline involving Gwen ever, which is a shame. Just a year before Sins Past came out, Marvel released a storyline called SpiderMan Blue. This comic, written by Jeff Loeb and drawn by Tim Sale, was like a love letter to the early days of Spider-Man, and it encapsulated everything that made Spider-Man Spider-Man. It's a self-contained story that's meant to be the best of Spider-Man while also encapsulating love and loss. Gwen and Peter's relationship in this story plays a humongous role, with the reader being able to see how Gwen's death still affects Peter to this day. For some people, this is the greatest Spider-Man story of all time. And for many others, it's just the greatest Gwen story of all time. However, when you look at this story through the lens of Sin's past, it seems to ruin everything. Behind this wonderfully woven tale, Gwen was getting railed by the Green Goblin. She was lying to Peter, and she had secret children. The meaning of her death, or at least the meaning Peter thought it had, wasn't true. Speaking of her death, that brings us to the most iconic storyline that Sin's past has ruined. The night Gwen Stacy died. This might be one of the most well-known Spider-Man issues of all time, if not one of the most well-known comic books of all time. In this storyline, Norman Osborn has a mental breakdown that releases the Green Goblin, and the Green Goblin wants to get back at Spider-Man. So, he abducts Spider-Man's girlfriend and brings her to the Brooklyn Bridge to kill her, or the George Washington Bridge. The drawing shows the Brooklyn Bridge, but the text originally said the George Washington Bridge. Anyway, Spider-Man and Green Goblin clash, and Green Goblin ends up hurling Gwen off the bridge. Spider-Man tries to shoot a web to catch Gwen, but when he pulls her up, she's dead. It's either from the whiplash from the sudden stop, or maybe the Goblin broke her neck earlier. This issue was extremely influential and groundbreaking. Up to that point, it had been unthinkable to kill off such a central character in a superhero story, especially the girlfriend of the superhero. This is because up to that point, superheroes didn't really fail so disastrously unless it was part of their origin story. However, this storyline in this comic is what started the change from the more lighthearted Silver Age of comics to the darker and grittier Bronze Age. Gwens Death did that. Gwens Death was extremely influential to the comic book industry. However, with the release of Sin's past, Goblin's motivation is no longer just wanting to hurt Spider-Man and get back at him. Goblin's true motivation is killing Gwen to protect the secret identity of their children, or to get back at her for leaving, or maybe since he can't have her, no one can. This storyline that forever changed the comic book landscape is now sullied by a convoluted, hated, and confusing mess. Although Sin's past might be one of the most hated comic book stories of all time, there is a saving grace to this. With so many people who hated Sin's past, we were bound to eventually get a Spider-Man writer who came along and wanted to retcon it out of existence. So, a few years ago, a writer came along named Nick Spencer who took over the Amazing Spider-Man title, and he hated Sin's past and a few other retcons, like One More Day. So he decided he would retcon Sin's past out of existence by making it all a manipulative lie created by Harry Osborn. Harry had made up the fact that the twins were Norman's kids, and they end up just being like clones or something. So now Spider-Man fans can rest easy knowing that they can forever ignore Sin's past. But what do you think? Was Sin's past the worst Spider-Man storyline of all time? Or are you one of the few people who actually liked Sin's past? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.